when I'm really wounded and dying in many ways. And it breathed life right back into my soul and was the turning point to begin to carry me into a thriving ministry to this day. But I look back at that and say, without that gospel community in that moment, what would have happened? Evil was already having a field day, but evil would have won. And that day, evil lost, because my gospel community in that moment, you didn't let me lose heart.
Welcome to the Field Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bob McNabb, and with me is my co-host, Scott Lundy, who serves as a leadership coach and trainer in the Middle East. Today we have with us our guest, Tom Mullis, who is an experienced field worker and has quite a bit of experience coaching team leaders, and also Jim Doggett, teams guru and leader mentor. Today our topic is gospel community, why it matters more than you think. Let me start us off by sharing a little bit about my own story and history with community. When I went to the field in 1990, I went with a team of people that had trained together, that had done ministry together in campus ministry, that had prayed together regularly and prayed for one another. We held each other accountable. We rejoiced together. We did some great things. And so I would say we had a huge head start compared to most other teams that I met on the field. But nobody in our circles was talking about the topic of gospel community, and we certainly didn't receive any training into how to consistently enter into the deeper levels of transformative community. Now, while our team experience was great, I think it fell short of being the transformative community that it could have been because we didn't really have the level of vulnerability and authenticity that we could have had and that would have made it even better. We did it by accident sometimes because the pressures of the field forced us there. But unfortunately, I, as the leader, did not lead our team into the type of vulnerability and authenticity that would have made it life-changing. And the reason is because most of the time I was living behind a personal protective strategy that I didn't even know I had. And when a leader does that, it's hard for others on the team to really open up and be vulnerable and authentic about their struggles. So while we had a really good team experience, I think it fell short of what it could have been. And to be honest, at that time, we really didn't know what we were missing because we'd never seen it or experienced it. I was in full-time Christian ministry for more than 30 years before I saw it and experienced it and realized what it really could be. I'm hoping this podcast series can help field leaders see what's possible and grow personally in their capacity to lead their teams into transformative community. I'm passionate about this because I believe we are losing more people from the field because of the lack of gospel community than any other reason. Oftentimes we'll say, well, the number one reason people leave the field is because of conflict. Well, conflict is really just the apple growing on the tree. It's the fruit. The real problem is at the heart level, where it's coming from. And James 4:1 says, why do you have conflict? Because of the passions that are raging within you. And I have that happening in me. And I can't tend my heart all by myself. I need other leaders, other people to help tend my heart and to help pull the weeds out, to help expose it when I need to repent, and to help minister words of gospel when I feel like I'm worthless. So I want our listeners to catch the vision for having a community around them that provides both challenge when that's what they need, and also that's there to speak as ambassadors of Christ the words of grace when that's what they need to hear.
Yeah, Bob, I can resonate with that, with field leaders, being a leader myself, but also mentoring another leader who is a field leader currently, and he is now in a gospel community. And one of the things that's come up is that he has some deep-seated anger issues. And so when you're on the field, it's not just the issues that you notice about yourself, but the blind spots you have that others are noticing but might not be as free or feeling safe enough to approach that. And so as we began to talk about those issues he was struggling with at a deep heart level, that next week he was at a holiday party with his team, and there was a lady on his team that came up to him as the party was dwindling down, and she just lit into him about why she was upset about this, that, and the other thing, and just ripping him anew and tore into him. And in the moment, he could feel himself getting defensive, right? But then as remembering he's a man, it created to engage, not to withdraw, not to dominate, which is what he normally would have probably done in this situation. But he was able to see it and say, okay, what's really going on in my own heart? And in the moment was able to just get in touch with, okay, I'm feeling attacked. I'm feeling like I'm not being respected, and maybe I'm not, but that's okay, right? And he was able to get to a good, safe place in his own heart and was able to think, okay, what's going on in this lady's heart? What's really going on? This issue is probably not really the issue, what's going on. But he was able to, in the moment, ask her a question about her heart and let her know, hey, I'm sorry, this is impacting you in such a negative way. Could we have a conversation about what's really going on? How is that impacting you? And so when he shifted it from the conflict itself to how she was being impacted, it began to, at a heart level, open her heart to his heart. And it's not that the issue went away, but he was able to navigate that conflict in a way that he could see not just a smaller story of him being attacked or being defensive or worrying about what others think, but he was able to see it in light of, okay, what's going on in my heart? What's going on in her heart? What might God be up to here? And asking questions in light of that. And that awareness came out as a time in gospel community. And then we were able to debrief that later, and he was able to see the progress that he was making in the gospel in his whole heart in the context of community. He was able to change the tenor and the temperature of his relationships with people on the team, inviting them into safety. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And I think when I hear that story, I think there have been a few times on my own over the years that I've been confronted in that way, and I've responded in a good way like this guy did. But there have been lots of times where I think I've thrown up a defensiveness. And boy, if I had a gospel community that I could have processed that with, who would have helped me regain perspective that I need to regain. And let me clarify, when we're talking about gospel community, we're not talking about gossip sessions. We're not talking about coming into places where you're using people's names, where you're telling stories. Not that at all. But a situation where you come in and you say, hey, I had someone that was really displeased with me, and they confronted me on this. And so you're speaking in these more generalized terms to protect other people. These are not places other people get devoured. That's not allowed. But where you can actually, though, share. And you know why it's so important for field leaders to have this? Because when you leave your home country with all your support systems and all that you have behind, and your friendships, your family, you leave all of that, your world becomes very compressed. Your social relationship network becomes very compressed to where when something goes wrong with one of the few relationships that you have, it's a big deal. It hurts a lot. The stakes are high. And so you can very easily hyper-focus on it, lose the plot, become very emotional over it. And this is a situation where we need other brothers and sisters in Christ, peers that are there that we can go to and say, hey, I'm losing it over this situation. And then have them speak truth, have them be that larger community that can help you regain perspective, hear the gospel from them, hear truth, be challenged and benefit from it. When you go and you're in these remote situations where your world has become compressed, it's that much more important. That's why field leaders need gospel community more than they think they do.
That's absolutely right, Bob. I remember being on the field. Your team becomes your family, your friends, your subordinates, your peers, the people that report to you. And also they're there for all the big events, for birth of your children, for holidays, for Christmas, for whatever it is, or you're celebrating those things together. I believe in this instance I was describing, and if we had had more of this when we were on the field together, I believe connecting to a gospel community, even outside that team, would have allowed us to thrive more in that. If we had people that could see our blind spots, that could challenge those things in the gospel, in community, and turn a really pressure cooker situation into something that could be a place to really thrive, grow, and experience conflict in a way that transforms us instead of takes us out of the game.
That's good, Tom. What about you, Jim? Why would you say field leaders need gospel community more than they realize?
I think gospel community can also just be overlooked and thought of as a given. In the movie Apollo 13, don't know if you guys have seen that, but there's this scene where they've been so focused on the mission to go to the moon, walk around, pick up rocks and all that. Well, something goes wrong. They're having to totally redo their plan. And somebody comes into the room and says, hey, all of this stuff we're talking about is moot if we don't get these guys oxygen and enough power to land their craft. We have to find a solution that gives them what they need to survive. We can sometimes miss just the basic need for us to be healthy and the oxygen to flow. Guess what? You want to plant a church? If you don't have the oxygen of a gospel community around you, I'm not very confident that what you reproduce is going to be helpful or sustainable over the long haul.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that field leaders need gospel community more than they realize is because spiritual warfare can sometimes be invisible, right? It's happening, but it's not always recognizable at the moment. Evil is pursuing every leader. Think about the field leader. They've left all of their stuff in their home country. They've left their family, their friends, their support system. They've come. They're highly invested. They're with a group of people who are highly invested, and they're about to have an impact, or they are having an impact. So if you're Satan, what do you do at this point? How can we stop this impact from happening? Well, if we could make this person lose heart, if we could make them just want to give up. So let's attack there. And he starts working. Maybe it's through some conflict. Maybe it's through some lack of fruit. Maybe it's through some financial issues. He's got so many different arrows in that quiver to make people lose heart. And that's evil is pursuing each field leader, wanting them to lose heart. And boy, do we need other leaders to come around. I think about when David was pursued by Saul, and the scriptures say that Jonathan showed up and helped him find strength in God. That's what a gospel community does. It shows up when you're in a place that you're about ready to give up and helps you find strength in God.
Amen.
Well, Bob, that really resonates with me. What are other reasons that come to mind for why field leaders need gospel community?
Yeah, I think another reason they need gospel community more than they think is that they are probably much more of a Martha than they realize. Recently, I was with a group of people and did a survey. It was over 100 and some people in the room, and did a survey, and I passed out note cards and I asked, how many of you identify more with Martha than you do Mary? And 81% said, I'm a Martha. And what Marthas need, and you think about, boy, what would that percent be for people who have felt called to go into ministry, to go overseas? I would say you're pushing 90-some%. You're up there high, the Marthas that are on the field. And boy, Marthas need to hear that there's one thing that's important, that there's one thing that must precede all other things, and that's to sit at Jesus' feet and worship him and delight in him and have our hearts in a joyful place. And out of that joy and out of that delight, go and plant churches, right? That's where we need to be. But that's not who most workers are wired as. And so all of us who are full-time workers overseas and deal with that probably need a good community around us that will speak the words of Jesus, that Martha, Martha, you are busy and concerned about so many things. Just sit down and worship and be with me. I know I need that.
all of us need this. All of us need a consistent check on where our hearts truly are so that the power of the gospel can come in and change and transform that into something useful and productive. You can't treat your weaknesses as something past tense. The strongest, sharpest leaders I know, and certainly the ones that I'm attracted to, actually still believe that they're a work in progress but that Jesus is going to leave them alone, and that they might even invite me to be a part of their sanctification. They might even invite me to give feedback on how they're doing or what I see. That is rich. It is so life-giving. And I could do that for the rest of my life. It seems like, even in the hardest of circumstances, if I have a team around me that's going to help me do that every day or most days, I almost feel like I could do anything. I don't even want to sign up to cross the street if I don't have that. I can swim through a lake of alligators and snakes if I have it, and I don't even want to cross the street if I don't have it. So somehow we got to tap into this more.
Yeah, that's good. I think another reason that field leaders might need a gospel community more than they realize is that we may have wounds that have scabbed over and we don't realize it. And you know what happens when a scab gets bumped? It comes off easily, it hurts a lot, it oozes, not good things. And so I think about my experience when I first got in a gospel community that really spoke to call out the glory of God that they saw in me. What a balm that was that went on those wounds and helped heal them in a way that knowledge from discipleship groups or correction and all these different things had never done. I didn't realize how powerful and how healing it was to have other believers speak God's perspective over me, the way that they saw me, the way that God saw me, using their mouth as his ambassador and them being an echo of what the Father saw. Man, what healing that created in my soul. And it helped transform the way that I related to other people. I didn't have those hurt places that I would turn around and unleash on people because there had been healing that had taken place in some of those places. And so I think we all have that. And it's pretty easy to get your scabs bumped when you're on a small team overseas. And especially when you have the weight of leadership on you, boy, we need to be going for becoming as healthy as we possibly can.
I heard it said once that going to the mission field is a lot like the life of an iceberg. And so back here in our mother culture where we've grown up and know all the signs and the language and all that, it's easy to protect, and our iceberg can get pretty big. We're in a good environment for big iceberg. Well, you take that same iceberg and put it in an environment where there's heat and there's pressure and there's, guess what? The iceberg always begins to shrink. It always begins to melt. And sometimes it is a huge surprise what comes out of a person when their protective strategies are melting away. They can actually be shocked at a thought or a sin that's starting to show up or whatever. So I wish every field leader knew that all of us are in that. We all come, even the best of us who had great parents and great churches and all the good stuff pouring on to us. The rigors of living in another culture for the purpose of the gospel will always melt your iceberg. And you don't need to be shocked that if something comes out that you're not prepared for, and who better than a gospel community around you to help you navigate that, to help you process it, really to follow the tracks of the scars or the scabs. One reason we've been scarred, I think, is so Jesus can follow those scars just like tracks on a train to the healing, nurturing that we needed in that moment and didn't get. And he then redeems all things. He becomes that salve or that balm, like Bob said. The team helps that be applied to your life. They create the environment where you can go to the doctor, the real doctor, Jesus, and hold out your scar to get some balm on it. But just telling your team's not going to fix it either. There is the team plays a role in helping you be okay and getting in front of Jesus so that he can then help whatever just came out of your iceberg. Don't be shocked by it. And a gospel community would be a great place to begin. Hey, what's God up to here? What is he about to heal that you weren't even thinking was going to be on the radar when you signed up to go overseas?
Yeah, and I think because it's on the inside, sometimes, and it certainly manifests on the what's going on the inside definitely manifests on the outside, but sometimes we don't really know what's going on in the inside, and it can be deceptive. I've been getting into hunting recently, and so I've been watching some YouTube videos, and I have this little game call, and one of the settings that you can put it on is raccoons. And so I've been watching some YouTube videos on guys using their game calls to call raccoons. And what I've seen is the raccoons will just come out of these trees that are hollow, and yet there's a hole in the side, and then it just more raccoons than you could imagine just come screaming out of these things. And you, if you're walking through the woods, you look at that tree and you're like, I would have never guessed that tree was full of raccoons, that it was hollow, and these nasty creatures are going to come, screaming out of this thing. And I think a lot of times I just don't know what's going on inside of me. I think that's where the heart is deceptive, and I need other people to help call out what's in there, help expose it, help it be seen and dealt with. Boy, you put the intensity of life on the field and with a small compressed world in there, and the stuff that can get brewing inside of you and that you might be unaware of can be pretty harmful and devastating. And so we all need to be in a community that can help us keep healthy, because then when you're healthy on the inside, think about what comes out. Leading from the inside out, it's been said. That's what we should aim for, leading from the inside out. And so that's what we're talking about, is being available to each other to help each other have health in our souls so that we can lead from some really healthy places. Well, let's go ahead and transition a bit now. I'd love to hear from you guys if you have personally had a time in your life when you needed gospel community more than you thought. Or perhaps you've seen another leader who really needed it more than he or she realized.
Well, Bob, I can think of a story right off the bat that illustrates the point you just made, and that is when you and I were on the field together, and evil was all over me. Evil was hunting me to take me out of the game, and almost did. And I was at one of the lowest points in my life. And I remember, rather than isolating, I was able to come to a few of you guys. And in that, I can remember a phone call where you were able to personalize some scripture that you believe God was giving you just for me. In that moment, it gave me heart. I had lost heart, and you were communicating courage, heart to me on the battlefield when I'm really wounded and dying in many ways. And it breathed life right back into my soul and was the turning point to begin to carry me into a thriving ministry to this day. But I look back at that and say, without that gospel community in that moment, what would have happened? Evil was already having a field day, but evil would have won. And that day, evil lost, because my gospel community in that moment, you didn't let me lose heart.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Tom. I'm glad that evil didn't win that day, and I'm really thankful for the ministry that you've had in so many people's lives since that season of your life. What about you, Scott? You've led a lot of people overseas. You've got to have a story or two to share with us.
So here's an example. I had a gentleman that I was his overseer, and he'd been on the field 3 or 4 months, language learning, Arabic. And we're doing kind of a quarterly check-in, just how's your heart, what's going on? And he was feeling like a failure because he said he wasn't sharing the gospel enough. And I'm kind of scratching my head like, how do you have enough Arabic to be sharing the gospel? And of course, we did live in a place where there are some English speakers, but it's not, to the level that he should be running around sharing the gospel in English that much, So I was a little perplexed that he's so stressed about this. And so I asked him, well, how much is enough? You say you don't feel like you're doing it enough. And he was talking about, 12 to 15 times a week. And I'm like, wow, 12 to 15 times a week in a culture you don't know, in a language you're just getting started in that takes at least 2 years. I was like, what's going on here? So I was trying to get down at the heart level. And we actually talked for an hour and a half. And in the end, his heart level issue was he felt like because he'd been stateside doing all this work, he'd raised all this money to go overseas to be a great worker, missionary overseas, that he needed to have something in his newsletters to justify being on the field. So that was his heart's desire to be accepted, to felt like a job well done. And he'd put because I asked him, well, who told you got to do 12 to 15 times a week? And it's just all stuff he created. It was all about feeling like he's good enough to be on donations, support, hit the ground running type thing. So we had to get down to that heart level and really say, okay, what is your desire? But what is God telling you about all this? Because I don't know anybody whose goal 12 to 15 times a week to share the gospel in a different language within 3 to 4 months of landing on the field.
Yeah, that's a great story of you being gospel community to him. You were an ambassador of Christ, in a sense, preaching the gospel to him and asking important questions to give him breathing space, freedom. I'm sure that made him feel more free and out from under the hand of this pressure that he felt to perform. And not that with the gospel we become lazy, not at all, but we come out of a full, whole heart and serve out of that posture, and it becomes so much richer to the people that we're ministering to when it's an overflow, comes out of overflow, not out of overwork.
I remember personally how I was impacted by my community in a way that I was not expecting. It wasn't on my to-do list of things to grow in or my actualization plan for the year, personal, whatever. I'd been doing ministry 20 years, I suppose. And in every role I'd ever had, I either was the leader or I was reporting directly to a leader, the leader. And so that made me feel, important and all that. Well, the particular ministry I was working with at that time, the board came back and said, oh, the CEO has too many people reporting to him. So we're going to change things up and limit that. And that made great sense. That was great leadership, great thing for the board to do. But that meant that I was now not going to directly report to the CEO or the leader of the team. Now I'm going to report directly to the COO. Well, that's nothing wrong with that. Still pretty high executive. Well, guess what? The COO of this particular ministry was a 26-year-old female. I was 52 at the time, twice her age. So there's an age thing that I'm wrestling with, but to be honest with this podcast, the thing I was most having a problem with was it's a female. Now, this was not just any 26-year-old female. She was a nuclear engineer. She had gone to work after college, after her Georgia Tech experience in nuclear engineering. She had gone to work for a international consulting group. And her last 3 years, her assignment was to be at the executive level of Coca-Cola in Atlanta. And she held her own and did a good job there. She gets called into missions, and now she's the COO of our organization. We were blessed to have her. But my immediate reaction that my boss is now going to become a 26-year-old female. I mean, I'm a white guy from Choctaw County, Alabama, and 52 years old. My response was, hell no. Thankfully, I was in a good gospel community, and they told me they understood the heartburn. But one person said, I wonder what God's up to. And then my wife said, wow, there could be something in this that's good. And I'm like, what? Why aren't these people defending me? Why aren't they ready to go to the board and tell them what? And the Father did a very kind work in my own heart. And he made me open to this idea of being vulnerable and following the leadership of someone half my age who was female. Men, I can't tell you how much I grew in that relationship. She's one of the most effective leaders I'd ever had. She didn't micromanage me. She provided for me the structure I needed to hit my targets. She also provided the resources from time to time that I was lacking. She really made me a better person. Not that the CEO wasn't doing a great job, but he was so busy. She actually provided an environment where I could hit my mark more easily. Guess what happened? she's 26 years old. She's got this guy that reports to her. He's 52. As I began to tell her how much I was positively impacted by her leadership in my life, it gave her more courage to lead more effectively in some other arenas and areas. And our friendship allowed her to step up and into some roles that before she had kind of not taken on because she was afraid she might not be received well. There's an example, I think, of gospel community helping me soften my heart to what God was up to. It led to even greater impact, not just through me and my heart, but through her and others around the team.
Great story, Jim. Thanks for sharing that with us. It's really cool to see how the Holy Spirit can use the community around us to turn something that could be kind of our undoing into a really great growth experience for us. What about someone else?
I think for me, a transformational season in my life and being in gospel community was I was in my mid-30s. I had just come through a divorce. I stepped out of ministry. I was on full support. So, a financial world came collapsing down. I was a layperson ministry for years before that. And so a lot of my identity and who I was tied up into my work and my identity as a disciple maker. And here it all, how is God going to use me? I was in a denomination that really, divorce is not good in any situation, but one, it felt like the scarlet letter D. And I just had lost all hope of ever being able to be in full-time ministry again, which I really felt like was my call. And I had a major depressive issue, and I ended up with a group of guys that were all in ministry and all had some type of challenge. Like 2 of them had to leave the field due to depressive or bipolar issues, and they couldn't get the meds right or something like that. 2 of the guys were getting to the age where they'd always aspired to be a lead pastor. And they're getting to the age they're like, the most I'm ever going to be is an associate pastor. I'm never going to hit that. And so just about everybody in the group had some type of thing they were chasing after in life. And it was kind of like midlife crises were hitting, and we're not going to be what we thought life would be like. And in that season, especially in some of my lowest depression times, I really just didn't feel connected to God. It didn't matter if I tried to do worship music or tried to do a Bible study, just all the things that people might do to feel more connected to God. It's like I didn't even have the oomph to sometimes get out of bed, much less feel a connection to God. And I just felt like my spirit was just in a coma, and there was this no connection with God. And it bothered me. And so I just had to share with the guys, like, look, I don't even feel like I can pray for myself. I feel like, I'm the crippled in the 4 guys, take them to Jesus. And they went on top of the roof and dug open the roof to lower them down. I'm like, that's where I'm at in my spirit right now. I don't even feel like I can pray for myself. So I just went before them and asked them, will you guys pray for me to somehow come spiritually alive? Because I feel dead. And I was able to share that. And, at the time that I was talking about it, I had, I was crying, snot running out my nose. It was pretty messy. And one of the guys in the group said, I've never seen somebody be so vulnerable with where they're at on spiritual stuff. And they loved me. They accepted me. They didn't look at me like I was from the moon or from Mars. And like, oh gosh, just, they didn't kick me to the curb. They embraced me and loved me through that hardship.
Scott, I am so thankful for God's grace in your life through that time. And I believe that you're able to minister to people today at a whole nother level than you could have before that hardship in your own life. So I'm really thankful that God was with you and has made you into who he has made you today. I wonder if anyone has a final word before we wrap things up.
One more thing I would add, or I would say about gospel community, if you're a field leader and you have grown beyond the gospel and you feel like you no longer need that message for your growth and sanctification, and if you feel like you're doing great on your own, then gospel community is not for you. But I would say that if you know desperately in your heart of hearts your deep need for the gospel on a day-by-day basis, and you know that God has created you for community, then I would say you need gospel community more than you could ever imagine.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Tom. And thank you, Jim and Scott, for what you shared today. I think as I reflect on what we've talked about today and the life of the Apostle Paul, I'm just struck by the counterintuitive reality that The strongest field leaders are not those who are the rugged individualists who feel like they don't need anybody else, but it's really the people who have figured out how to engage in authentic gospel community with those they minister with and those they minister to. You know, in reading Paul's letters, it's clear that he felt a profound sense of loss and loneliness when he was by himself, because either he was deserted or he had to send his coworkers away on a critical mission. He really relished the time that he had together in his community. He found such joy in that, and he expresses that in his writings. We want every field leader and every field worker to be able to connect with others and have that kind of quality gospel community. And so if we can help you connect with others, go to our webpage. It's on the Missio Nexus website. It's the Field Leaders webpage. And use the contact form and let us know that you would like to join a gospel community. You'd like to be connected to other leaders. It'll probably be with people in other organizations, which will make it that much sweeter. We hope to have new groups starting regularly, so let us know if we can help you connect. In our next episode, we're going to explore more deeply the impact of gospel community on field leaders, the teams that they lead, and churches that they plant. It's going to be a good one, and so please join us for that. And we'd love to hear from you in the comments section about how God may have used this episode in your life, or maybe something that you've learned about gospel community that you'd like to share with the rest of us. We'd love to hear from you. Well, that'll be it for today. This has been the Field Leaders Podcast, a ministry of Missio Nexus and a part of the Missio Nexus Podcast Network. Leaders, you're not alone. We are here to help you connect, learn, grow, and collaborate. God bless.